Colourful World in Nickolai Gold, Volume 1. A reading by Lila Sarah. Chapter 2. Rocky Maze on Valley Way. Catch the bugs! Yells Plumpy Pout. Well, with the fairies, she watches the tiny sparks down the valley, the bugs that burrow, the buds that furl and unfurl, the jolly hosts, and the loop that swells and groans. Up the maze she tickles the leaves, nourishing the fibers, the purples, the clumps, the yellows, and the greens. Deeply fascinated by the swell of springtime, round and round she dances, up and down she trails, trekking the maze with her fairy friends, minding the matter that swirls the valley. Ouroboros Plumpy Pout reigns with a grin. Her stance is as neutral as the freshest blood, neither too thick nor too thin. There she scales, beaming with sunlight. Floaty yet wingless, she circles the maze, charming the birds of prey. Her piercing gaze permeates the core of all elements in the cirque, linking the rocks beneath boisterous shrubs. Drawn by the swell, she coaches the fairy flock enthusiastically. In with the matter she speaks, down with the other she kicks. Festively wrapped with glitters, her feet jitters above the maze, fertilizing the ground beneath her feet. She is well with the fairies indeed. Her name is written on the bright side of the book, neither on the left nor on the right, but on the bright. Can it be right? The probability of her being on the bright side is quite high, considering the outlook of the valley. Brightness has reigned, darkness has lost its voice. Downright seasonal, it is springtime after all. Rocky Maze cradles the vessel of light, at least for now, when the swell of spring swirls the bloom. Wrapped with light, it shelters countless dimensions. The world of insects, the kingdom of the plants, the crown of gemstones, the maze of rocks, the seat of the purples, the spine of the greens, the flowers, the willows weep, the medium, the tiny, and the microscopic beads. Purples and flower fairies inhabit its wide and sprouting outskirts. Up with the insects they glide, down with the willows they thrive. Juggling emeralds and sapphires above the rocks, they sway with Plumpy Pout, basking for sunlight as their purple petals swell. They beam with brightness, nourishing the sprouts, the buds, the bugs, and the bubbling stream. Symbiosis is their aim. Mutualism? Most certainly. Commensalism? Possibly. Parasitism? Less likely. They guard the valley tirelessly, glorifying its brightness before darkness sets in. Are they influenced by the elements? Unarguably so. Round and round they dance above the valley, circling the table of elements within the maze. Why is the table round? Is it meant to be circular rather than angular? Why is carbon in space 6? Why is sodium in space 11? Purely coincidental? Or something mystical? Why does liquid swirl with the other? What is in its matter? Fluidity? Sparkle? Perhaps. Up the cliff tops, swirly water sprouts endlessly. Downwards it flows, cascading harmoniously into the bubbling stream. Clear and sparkly, it captures the valley's cleavage, binding all water fountains into a sum of circular branches. Its swirls whip the boulders, and blocking the tunnel of wonder along the stream, nourishing the tiny sparks that thrive within its swirls. Life is the matter, bright is the sky, the valley blossoms with life. Above it rests the maze, within it are the willow trees, the catacombs are beneath it, whilst the others pass through it. Obviously fertile, it breathes the breeze, the mixtures of elements within its grasps, oxygen and its ghosts, nitrogen and its pores, carbon and its souls. It drinks the solvent most certainly, sipping in water and her moons. Mash the runs quick! Plumpypot yells. Her voice is as clear as a sprout's. She points her wand towards the table, seemingly dazzled by the elements within its form. Equations rise above her. Solvents whirl beneath her feet. She sways with the other in a rhythm of fate, harmonious with the fairies, mutually symbiotic with the rest. Oh, my lobes, my chest, why can't I breathe? Utters the fairy head. Her skin has become darker, more purple than the violets on the cliff tops. Her chest heaves heavily, stretching her fibers. Up she pushes carbon and its souls. Down she tackles the tickles in her throat. Her nares flare, letting in the breeze. Seemingly out with the fairies, she catches her breath. Whoosh, fairy head, I shall get you the eights. Ghostly oxygassy twig, get 8 out of its space and mix with the first, utters Plumpypot. In with the matter, she pulls the 8 out of its space. Out with the other, she mixes the 8 with the first. Shapeless it floats, airy, light. Boost, you need a ghost, Plumpypot tells the fairy head. Up with the gases, she poses. Down with the matter, she whispers, drawn by the formula above her head. She boosts the flow of oxygen above the fairy's realm. She must have pushed the blurs away from the cliff tops. The insects are behind her. The blossoms crown her head. Is she the equation? Or the solvent? A bit of both, perhaps. You have filled my pockets. Plumpypot miss, you have opened my airways with your twigs. I am amazed. You have cleared my chest, utters the fairy head. In with the fairies, she inhales, slowly yet deeply, in and out, mixing the ghosts with her matters naturally. Gosh, these ghosts are kind. What constitutes it if we sum the 8 and the first? Can it be 9? It can't be that straightforward, really. Can it be 9 firstly? Can it be 0 secondly? What can we derive out of it? Botany adores it. Entomology pulls it. What does it do to the maze? Plumpypot questions herself. Whoosh! The breeze blows gently across the bridge. It swirls the bubbling stream yet again. In with the solvent, it freshens. Out with the matter, it watches the other, nourishing the bugs, the buds, the willows, the birds, the fairies, and the maze. Whoosh by the wind, Plumpypot sings the hymn of the fairies. Round and round she juggles, up and down she circles. Gracefully she dances above the boulders of gems. She is well with the fairies, bright as the valley. She hums with the rest, the insects, the hunters, and the praise. Beams, arches, tones, and mixes, bonds, bolts, nuts, and gateways. Hydrogen shall bond, oxygen shall rise. The primes shall mix to shape the circuits. Primary firstly, secondly, tertiary thirdly. Chronology is of utmost importance. What's the sum of purple and green? Which is the prime? Which is the secondary? Earthly is its sum most probably. Ghosts, holes, pores, and tunnels. Tertiary may spin the wheel of the fairies. Matter rises, matter drowns, matter pulses, matter's bind, sings Plumpypot. She hums like a bee in the eve of springtime, beaming with the buds. The bonds lift her spirit triumphantly. She is well with the fairies indeed. In she wanders, out she whispers, minding the cushion as the bond divides itself. What's the sum of the first and the 8? Plumpypot questions herself. Up she beams, down she sings, breathing in the ghosts. Watching the pores, she widens the holes. She is in the bright side of the book after all. Out she wanders, wandering yet again. Vibrant as the violets, daft as the daffodils. The third speaks the second. The first utters the third. How odd is the even! How even are the bonds! How many holes are there to open if the mixture cradles the prime? What's the sum of the first and the eighth? Can it be 9 rightfully, or ghostly utterly? What is it really? Plumpypout asked the fairy head. Plumpy mixes dots and spirits, pouty bonds, bolts and bridges, Martian buds glide with the roses, unicorn petal waltz with the heads. Don't bog yourself, Plumpypout, miss. Can it be 9? Maybe. Rightfully? Possibly. Is it in with the matter? Less clearly. Or is it out with the other? Potentially. Physical? Chemical? Ghostly? Open the maze, Plumpypout, miss, replies the fairy head. Achoo! Plumpypout sneezes. Rather sensitive to the matters that surround her, she feels its existence within her bounds, its potency, its fuels, and its wrath. Her filters are in the cauldron, simmering, ready to fight the spikes of the bugs. Wrapped with light, her blood flows and her lumens, neither too thick nor too thin. It passes through her pores, untouched by the spikes of the bugs initially. Her fibers hum inside her, strengthening her clumps. In she breathes, out she kicks. She sees the pool of water within the maze, the cascades and the mists, the fuel and its heat. Why are the leaves green? Why are the fairies purple? She questions herself, reflective of the matter and its wholeness. Because of heat, water rises. Up it shall float, ghostly yet warm. Down it shall fall, rainy yet calm. Evaporation makes ghosts. Condensation thrills the hosts. Heat in evaporation? Coolness in condensation? What makes the leaves green? Plumpypout questions herself yet again. She seeks the leaves keenly, minding the flow around the valley. The bugs circle her. Its spikes tickle her linings, making her clumps absorb more water. Moisture builds in her fibers even more. Heat dilates her lumens. Her blood seems to have hit the cauldron. It appears to boil as her entirety thirsts for oxygen and water. In she breathes. Out she sneezes. She shivers with the leaves as her filters fight the spikes. She must be cold under the brightness of springtime. But why? Can it be the bugs? Possibly. The spikes? Most probably. Compensatory? Certainly. Are bugs harmless without its spikes? Carbon is in 6, oxygen is in 8. Hydrogen is in with the first. What occurs if the leaves perspire beneath the maze? Sweaty as the leaves, Plumpypout breathes the freshest air. In with the blossoms, she opens the gate. Up with the fairies, she brightens the bridge. What happens if the pores draw the light in? Will the lining expand or shrink? What occurs if water fills the roots? Will the leaves continue to pull carbon in its souls? These pores fuel my wits. I'm totally engrossed with photosynthesis. Photons there, carbon here, water down there, ghosts, souls into holes. Oxygen rises as sugar coats, utters Plumpypout. Whoosh! The wind blows above the maze. Its breath rustles the leaves quite forcefully this time. It shakes the fibers, prompting the prettiest bud to seek shelter beneath the willows. In with the other, it swirls the matter. Out with the purples, it rustles the greens. Its gains are many compared to its losses. It must have held the flask of blue blood at some point. Its hands must have reached the crescent moon. Up with the third, it steadily roams. Down with the first, it brews the storm. Lightning strikes the cliff tops as the wind hits the willows. Its tongue licks the brittle twigs along its path, illuminating the hanging bridge beneath it, instantly sparking a slow-burning fire to the prettiest willow leaf. Fiery and hot, electricity swirls in its fibers, rendering the wind breathless as embers fly towards it. Fiercely it hits, constantly it hovers. Up the heavens it rains momentarily as the wind redeems its breath. Bolts of thunder roar repeatedly, ferociously loud. Its sound frightens the fairy flock. Beneath stormy skies, its forces rattle the bugs, the buds, the bolts, and the nuts, tuning its loudness with the soft hums of the willows. Slowly it calms the raging storm within its grasp, in time for raindrops to fall like galloping stallions above the cliff tops. Fairy flock, glide to the bridge, shelter yourselves beneath the buds and the leaves, Plumpypout utters. Well, with the fairies she hovers. Out with the other she whispers, adamant to seek shelter beneath the willow twigs. Right, we'll see you across the bridge, replies the fairy head. Raindrops trickle above the valley. The storm must have tickled the vapor. Its arms must have punched the clouds. How can this be possible? Is water vapor too heavy to bear? The ghost must have flooded the air, perhaps. It must have cooled the cradle of the gods. Liquid water evaporates, gassy water condenses, solid water melts. Raindrops wet the leaves and the bridges. Down it falls to the ground. Its fluidity sifts through the pores, soaking the linings beneath it. The willows are alight, not with fire, but with life. Licked by lightning, taunted by thunder, its twigs begin to sprout rather strangely. Outwardly, it bends its branches as its roots absorb the bouncing raindrops. Inwardly, it roars the storm into its core. Ah, the fire is licking the dragon heads. Hurry, sprinkle water over the twigs, screams the fairy head. The chains are all set, replies Plumpypout. Raindrops fall into the maze. Water has lost its vapory sense. In with the matter, it nourishes the filters. Out with the other, it fuels the swell, filling the fairy's marble up to its rim. Ghosts, tunnels, bolts, and holes, the maze is now open for the jolly hosts. Up with thunder, it speaks the matter. Down with lightning, it evens the swell. Through spikes it shall filter, through bugs it shall quiver. Its rocks shall anchor the purples. It shall rock the bridge and the fairies. The greens shall rise above it. The bugs shall paddle through it. What type of symbiosis is there if the spikes balance the hosts? Parasitism? Less likely. Mutualism? Maybe. Commensalism? And surely. The host shall prosper. The spikes shall hum the quiver. The bugs need its spikes. What type of symbiosis is it then? What exists if the three gets combined just there in the middle bend? Meso there. Meshi here. Mesosymbiosis, perhaps. Meso in the host and the bugs. Grrrr. The stormy sky opens its door. Lightning sways with thunder, waltzing with the quivers. Darkness looms in the bright side of the book, blocking the light once again. Gone is the bright side for the time being, undoubtedly so. The sky is raging purple, aubergine-like purple. Darkness into the light, ashes into flesh. Why is it dark if light dissipates? Height, weight, density and specks, dust, darkness, storms and links. These factors are in with the rest. Deep in the matter, perhaps. Darkness absorbs the light. Brightness scatters the vibes. The sky is littered with dust above the marble of fairy lights, alarming the fairy flock, the host, and the bugs alike. Meshy are the filters, spiky are the quivers, snug are the bolts and nuts. Storm into brightness scatters the ashes, dust into flesh, vapor into blood, fibers into clumps. Meshling shall weave a cradle in the willow's trunk, Plumpypout utters. Achoo! The fairy head sneezes. In with the bugs, she pauses. Out with the fairies, she wanders. And faced by the roar of thunder, she pulls the bolts of lightning into her soul, allegorically so. In the realm of the purples, she hears the mesh as it threads the weaves, Pausing with the fairies, she gazes at the sparks above the willow twigs. Mesh, threads, strings and fibers, synonyms, antonyms, hints and filters. Meso here, meshy there, sparks fly everywhere. Opacity, translucency, reflectivity, absorbency, absurdity. The denser it gets, the treacherous it becomes. The thread shall speak the mesh. It shall replicate the waves. Why is purple highly debatable? Is it due to carbon, fusion, or the mazy motion? Can it be fueled by the storm? The fairy head reflects. Let's go to cradle quick, yells Plumpy-Pout Miss, distracting the fairy head out of her nuggets. Fueled by the storm, perhaps. The maze's marble stretches its membrane towards the willows. Liquid water whips its rim, highly absorbent from top to bottom. It is heavily soaked and swollen, and arguably so. In with the fibers, it filters the spikes. Out with the matter, it shrinks and expands. Inwardly firstly, outwardly secondly. Its curves virtually stretch into the bendy willow tree, into the branches of a willow sage called Lentigious Missy Twig specifically. Lentigious Missy Twig pauses with the fairy flock. Her slender neck complements her tiny waist. Long and swan-like, she ensnares sparrows and hummingbirds. She hums with the wind harmoniously, minding the fibers along her skin. Up with the purples she poses. Down with the greens she listens. Meek and bendy, she burrows her feet into the loam fertile ground. Her roots mirror her sweeping twigs, fibrous and meshy, reflective of lightning and its moons. She hears her roots crawl into the catacombs. There she feels her fibers expand naturally. Seemingly stirred by the storm, her long jet-black hair accentuates her dark brown eyes, where willow buds and dragon heads thrive side by side. Graciously, she beams in the bright side of the book, grateful of the storm and the darkness that goes with its motion. The cradle is set above the willow twigs, says the fairy head. Thank you very muchly indeed, Plumpy-Pout replies. Minding the maze's marble, she gazes at the shoots in Lenty's branches. The ghosts are above her, the bugs are beneath her, the willow shoots are within her grasps. There, across the bridge, she hums with the insects and the buds. She must be well with the fairies then, neither on the left of them, nor on the right of them, but on their bright side. There she sways with the wind, humming with the twigs cheerfully. Lengthy twigs, meek and winding, shoots in hosts, green and sweeping. The buds shall rise, the storm shall weaken, darkness into light shall weep the mixings, Plumpy-Pout sings, waitingly forming a celestial bay-leaf crown above the cradle. Plumpy-Pout Miss, there's a trick attached to it, a chemical kick that wakes the mixes. It rests where the hunter sits, it rises where the haunted speaks. Down the valley it stretches, up the maze it watches, says the fairy head. Absurdity, absorbency, complexity. It can't be it if it's a she. Can it be it? Can it be he? It is a she, most probably, utters Plumpy-Pout. Seemingly out of her nuggets, she quizzes the fairy head. Are you tricking yourself, Plumpy-Pout Miss? Here, let me speak its phrase. Full moon is spinning, its orbit is twinkling. Can it be a she then? Asked the fairy head. Understandably muddled, she forgets to speak the remainder of the phrase. She's utterly confused. Out with the fairies, indeed. I'm glad you noticed the trick, Purple Fairy Head. The twigs in the chalice of tricks link the cradle in Lentigious Missy Twig, Plumpy-Pout replies. The bridge starts to tremble soon after, seemingly disturbed by the trickle of tricks in Lenty's twigs. Its tenacious fibers swing with the howls of the wind, dislodging the rocks along the cliff's edges. Achoo! The fairy head sneezes once again, spiked by the bugs. She crosses the bridge just in time. The answer is engraved in the trunk, the buds, the insects, and the bugs. Plumpypout coaches the fairy head. Convincingly lucid, she prompts the latter to seek the chalice of tricks. She then points her wand towards a cradle, transcribing the twigs in its wrappings. Purple fairies float towards the willows. Haste defines their flight. Undoubtedly shaken by the storm that hit the maze, they seek shelter beneath the twigs. Their wits are rather flimsy, uncoordinated in the truest sense. Off they scream with the dragon heads as the willows bow down. In with the matter, they seek the tunnel. Out with the other, they circle the marble of fairy lights. "Updraft, downdraft, come down, fairy flock," says Plumpypout. "This storm is freaking me out," the fairy head replies. "This storm shall pause. Brace the lightning, grasp the thunder. Together we shall utter the phrase of wonder. Don't freak out. Just spin the tricks in the maze's marble before the storm stops the rattle." Lente just Misty Twig utters. Her dark brown eyes reflect the strikes of lightning vividly. In with the buds, she blossoms. Out with the bugs, she stands the storm. Mist encloses her bottom half, from her navel to her roots, shrouding the seed in her cradle. Grrrr! Thunder roars above the willows, loud as the rattles of an erupting giant. Its ghost shakes the valley down to its core. Why does it grumble? What is in its matter? Why does it growl like a grizzly bear? Does it speak for itself? Or does it resonate with the strikes of light across the horizon? Lightning firstly, thunder secondly. Light is faster than the speed of sound, obviously. Lightning sticks her tongue out fleetingly. Her strikes ignite the seed in Lente's cradle, between the marble and the barren twig. Its sparks pierce the silver bead, cracking the crust that wraps the seed. "Fairies of the maze, brace yourselves. Watch the seed as lightning and thunder unveil the fibers," utters Plumpypout. Up with vapor, she floats. Down with raindrops, she soaks the roots. There she watches the willow, in awe as the seed sparkles above the cradle. "Oh, what a beauty!" utters the fairy head. Soon after, the shoots of the willow spurt upwards. Fast it grows towards the sky, dazzling the buds, the bugs, the insects, and the invisible kind. Serpentine rainbow looms above it, accelerating its growth. Beneath the sky, it bends humbly, swaying with the breeze pliably as the clock strikes 6 across the bridge. Thereafter, the seed cracks its shell to countless pieces. Its spontaneity reflects the endless waves that surrounds it, boundless and constant. Piece by piece, its fragments fall atop the cradle. There it sits momentarily, before transforming into crumbs of unleavened olive bread. Without a doubt, the seed is open at last. Crumbs line the cradle beneath it. Easterly wind blows its remaining fragments, dispersing its matter into the realm of the purples, scattering its particles over the maze, where hosts and bugs thrive side by side. What will happen if I tickle the fibers atop the seed? Will lightning bestow a sprig of sage into its entirety? Or cause a spark that dazzles the blossom of the fairies? Asked the fairy head. Light in zigzags strikes the expanse. At 9 minutes past 6, it touches the willowy cradle, vividly casting embers of spirit glide above the twigs. Soon after, Nickolai gold springs to life, straight from Lente's bosom, where sparks fly along the willow shoots. Fireflies surround the scented breeze, welcoming the sparks of life in Lente just Misty Twig. Sage, myrrh, and frankincense aromas scent the cradle, thoroughly mixed with dust. It sculpts Gold's body beneath the roar of thunder and lightning strikes. Vapor to blood, it mixes with solid, liquid, and gas. Solvent? Solutions? Solutes? Souls? It swirls above the willow twigs, drawing the flask of blue blood and the chalice of tricks beneath the marble of fairy lights. Flames whirl in the wind's belly above eucalyptus treetops. The tree is alight with life. Bendy branches sprout from its straight and stately trunk, forking a canopy of dreamscape beneath Pompeian sky. It holds a resin of immortality, merging its tips with the roots beneath it. Purple fairy head, light the lift along my branches. Hit the fork that tuned the ears of sun. Hear the harp as a tree of knowledge bestows a full dose of wisdom divine, utters Lentigious Misty Twig. Gotcha, Twig, replies the fairy head. Achoo! Gold sneezes adorably. Up with the wind, he breathes. Down with the willows, he rattles the twigs. He is saturated with gifts. The 5 common senses plus the extra 3. These gifts fill his being from top to bottom. Olfactory firstly, he smells the blossoms above his cradle. Auditory secondly, he hears the roar of thunder across the horizon. Visually thirdly, he clearly sees the strikes of light. Somatosensory fourthly, he feels Lenthi's touch. Gustatory fifthly, he finds the milk tasty off the willow trunk. And ESP sixthly, he glides into the tunnel without bounds. Ah, this is unreal, Plumpypout utters. Weightless as cotton, she spins in amazement. In awe of the sparks that brightens the cradle, she watches Gold quite intensely, seemingly dazzled by the folds that surrounds his navel. Willow twigs, milk the cord into Gold quick, says Plumpypout. Yellow as the buds, good as gold, replies the fairy head. Perfect! Perplexingly perfect. Perfect is the word to describe this creature called Gold. Wrapped in a bodice, his fibers are meshed, embroidered with divine threads. He'll wrestle with the gods and brighten the path. He'll open the closed and seek the gate to Wonderstock, uttered Lentigious Misty Twig. Enthralled by her phrase, turtle spiders sing with cheers, rhyming with the unicorn lilies and the dragon head blossoms beneath the bridge. Comfortably, it hangs loosely in a web of silk, blissfully content as the shooting willow twigs. Similarly, the purple fairies join the chorus, humming a triumphant melody with the rest of the valley. There they float around the cradle, minding the leaves as its pores open widely along its surface. Plumpypout miss, kindly get the flasks of milk from the chalice of tricks, says Lentigious Misty Twig. Vigil in her midst, she watches Gold as lightning bestows a kiss. Achoo! Bless the milk! Plumpypout sneezes. Soon after, Gold breathes the breeze atop his cradle. Courageously so, he opens his eyes, fearless of the puzzles inherent to the maze. He touches the twigs as its tips extend towards his way of light. There in his cradle, he wanders with the buds, the insects, the bugs, the willows, and the fairy flock, catching Lentigious Misty Twig's gaze wholeheartedly. Fueled by light and sound, a dish of semi-liquid mix boils atop the marble. It binds with iron and its moons, straight from the bend as heat melts the solid of all solids in a flask. Liquid silver traps the hand of time in the maze's marble. Quirky and quick, it resembles a sweet-toothed bug less clearly. Its mix replicates the filaments of time emerge in a solvent, purging its own belly with opposing mixes that turn into equal portions of metal folds. Cubes of coolness seize the heat, even the blend in a chalice of molten mix, says Lentigious Misty Twig. With just one wing, neon butterflies glide blissfully above the chalice, profoundly dazzled by the mix. Their wings extend further into the cradle, strengthening their flight. Butterflies of the maze circle the cradle of twigs, unite with the dragon heads and feed the unicorn lilies along the cliff, says Lentigious Misty Twig. Achoo! Plumpypout sneezes. Drawn by Gold, she breathes the breeze of springtime, sneezing as the buds releases its fragrance unsparingly. There she watches the butterflies and the bees, thrilled as its spikes tickle the blossoms. It starts with a P. utters the fairy head. Pollination, Plumpypot replies. That's it. That's the word. It's the workings of the butterflies, the birds, and the bees. Pollination it is. It can make you sneeze, says the fairy head. Indeed, fairy head. Well, Plumpypot miss, let's clap with the fairies, laugh with the lapping petals that blossoms with the dragon heads, says lentigious Missy Twig. Gotcha, Twig, Plumpypot replies. Shh. Quiet. We need to mind these variances and watch the hydrogen bubbles fluctuate, says the fairy head. She glides with the fairies across the bridge, minding the serpentine stream with the cradle vigilantly. There in his cradle, Gold arches his infant body instinctively. His fingers wriggle with the twigs, catching the fairy head's glare. With his hands he grasps Blanty's waist. His lips quiver as blood gushes through his cord. He wriggles quite vigorously, rattling the bud that cuddles the vine. Then a wailing rhyme escapes from his lips as he suckles the bud. His tiny fingers curl like jellyfish catching ocean spuds. Milk spurts from the pores on his cradle, and obliterated by the blanket of buds, it flows abundantly, in equal proportion that satisfies the whining gods. Ethereal current travels through his fingertips, merging celestial bodies in a flask of blue blood. Consequently, his lips turn blood orange as Pharaoh's milk fills his funnel, and paralleled strength defines his grasp. He then pulls the twigs whilst guzzling a bottle of mineral sap. Milky Way showers kisses on his forehead armed with a crown. In with the fairies he wanders, out with the matter he travels the expanse virtually. The sage asleep has bestowed him with dreams of many faces. Nightmare as myrrh infuses its incense, embalming the dead, and sweet dreams as the scent of frankincense courts the fairies. In a dusty pillar, a torch with two heads guides his way as he drifts to oblivion. Covertly, he glides toward the sunken galleon of imaginary lines. Yawning adorably with the buds, he stretches his arms as his spirit journeys in and out of the tunnel of light. There he paddles through the flickers of scented substance. Spirit vapor settles on the fabric beneath his feet. Suddenly, he sees the sparks across the bridge. Up with the ghosts he listens. Down with the fairies he rattles the mesh, stirring the chalice of tricks along the process. Plumpypot miss, blow the spirit vapor mix. Ah, watch the chalice of tricks quick, yells lentigious Missy Twig. Coincidentally, gold reaches the summit in Saturn's orb. Silver shines opposite a mirror that mimics the rings of gold, and tarnished in a verse of harmonious collision that humbles a wandering spirit. Shh! Quiet, Queen of Twigs, says the fairy head. There's a rhyme surrounding it. The realm of sheer nothingness permeates the chalice between countless grains of round wheat. Eyeballs quiver on its spherical socket, shifting as it rolls into the bottomless deep, utters lentigious Missy Twig. Surely it does. The chalice is as bottomless as its tricks. It holds a dream of many faces, dreams that may turn into nightmares, Plumpypot utters. Gold is in a state of dream. Rowing towards a curtain of blossoms, he paddles his vessel, mindful of the hidden monsters that lurks beneath the surface. His heightened senses guide his strokes, and wavering as his wits, prompting his shapeless self to paddle into the waves. Loops of soft woolen ropes partially obscure his path, bewildering as the soaring waves that ingest the rugged cliff. In with the twigs he stretches, out with Plumpypot he watches. He rests atop the twigs, nourishing the shoots and lent his waist effortlessly. Without a fuss, the willow twigs embrace the cradle once again, tucking the veil of invisibility between its shoots. Its membranes wrap Gold's being protectively, forming a whimsical mesh above the twigs. The buds have opened, the bugs have bounced, the hosts have flourished above the ground. At the bottom of his leap, Gold slips into a spirit pattern. quick as a combustion that sparks the breath of life. Breathing in rapids, he edges in and out his twiggy cradle, gazing at the maze as hydrangea hedges waltz with a fairy flock. There he advances a crossing of a dream bewildering as wild flowers. He watches the valley tremble, dropping its deathly glare along its midline. "Plumpy Pout, miss, what consists of mix with 2 heads?" questions the fairy head. "Twist me fate, a twig of many things and a bay-leaf crown from the rocky cliff," Plumpy Pout replies. Their gestures sync with the rest of the valley. Through their whispers, the dragon heads blossom. The bugs strengthen its spikes through their phrases. The insects tickle the leaves through their touch, and through their courage, a spark of life forms above the cradled twigs. Soon after, length its bosom blossoms fully. It encloses the wrinkly cord in gold's navel, coating its crust with silver mist. Its bed pulsates gently until an impulse of heat hits its brace, drying the cord further within its grasp. Bonds in union permeates the cord, merging Orion's chain with a loop, forming invisible threads that transcends all dimensions. One of the heads shall smoothen the rough, the other shall speak a word that frees the mouth. Behold his navel, barrels of tarry ravage shall catch his purple gold apparel, says slanty just Missy Twig. Thereafter, the cord touches freely. Its dryness draws an array of fine lines, brown and wrinkly. It gently falls atop the mound of grass, striking the pores that lines the leafy surface. Very well indeed, I shall head to the rocky cliff, get the bay-leaf crown, and comb the dragon heads, says the fairy head. Just right then, fairy head, I shall rustle the twist me fate mix, sing the rhyme of many things, and glide with the twigs. Plumpy Pout utters. She beams with the fairy head graciously. Her eyes twinkle with a chalice of tricks, illuminating the twigs and the cradle above it. "Gotcha!" utters Plumpy Pout. Hastily, she dives in toward the blossoms, circling the fairies with her gaze. There she waits, eyeing the fairy flock as they hover above the cradle. Marvelous! Blissfully fabulous! The sage of sleep have infused his wondrous works, says lentigious Mrs. Twig. Amazingly wonderful, Plumpy Pout replies. Beneath curious gazes, gold sleeps heavily in his twiggy cradle. Rhythmic bliss defines his peaceful existence, calming the fairy head and the chalice of tricks alongside him. Gradually, he circles his sleepy gaze on lentigious Mrs. Twig's bosom. His fingers wriggle with the blossoms intermittently. His eyes are as bright as lightning strikes. Up with the buds, he senses the mixes. Down with the twigs, he stands the ground. There he stamps his feet heavily, causing the valley to tremble. "Ah, stir the blend, quick!" screams the fairy head. "Twist me fate in the crown of bay leaf. Don't ever stress yourself, fairy head," utters Plumpy Pout. "Ah! Do you hear the stomps? It's heavy!" the fairy head screams. "He doesn't need a twist me fate then," utters Plumpy Pout. Gold grows into a boy of 12 instantly. He didn't need the twist me fate twig after all. The willows are beside him. The fairies watch over him. Lightning is behind him. Thunder is in front of him. His thumbs are distinct, loud as the growls of the dragon heads. Immortal sage of the weeping willow twig stuns the ground. His gaze speaks of puzzles that utters the language of the galleon's master, phrases that quieten the storm at sea and in dry dock. The hunter's head, the tale of the haunted, the matter that utters, the scripts that cradles the cure. He holds the laurel beacon conscientiously. His wavy locks frame his soft glowing cheeks, whilst his wide brown eyes embrace the heavens and its shrouds. Blood orange is the earth beneath him, fiery yet cool. Its crust converges with the rocks along its path, roughly sculpting a basin of wonder beneath the rugged cliff. Along its surface, turbulent waters flow into the serpentine river, clearing the vine that stagnates the rapids. None the less human, his thumb shall tilt the marble, splashing wisdom divine. Then, A line shall form between his sockets, bridging the sky and ground, utters lentigious Missy Twig. Nevertheless human? Did you say human? Extra human, maybe. Not at all human, if I misspeak the key. Shake the mix of sage and shoulder its blend. A sage shall pop off his human build straight from the chalice bend. Lumpy Pout utters. Let's wait for the rain, whispers the fairy head. After a glance, the sky opens directly above them. Raindrops trickle, flowing downstream beneath the cliff tops, forming a layered gloss inserts into the rocks. Steadily it falls from the clouds, totally attuned to the bolts of lightning and thunder strikes. Opposite the bridge, its fluidity calms the boulders, shielding the crystalline telescope in Stargazer's Keep. The basin has been sculpted straight from the cliffs. Let's watch it rest beneath the Childian flame tree along the crest. Quick, let's find its coordinates. Lumpy Pout speaks. Achoo! Gotcha, miss. I know where it is. It's next to the bulging waves. Gold utters. End of chapter 2.